near future, Japan establishes the Tokyo Metropolitan Advanced Nurturing High School to mold the country's next elite generation. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, a lonely and ugly student, is stuck in the lowest class, D class, where the school dumps its so-called failures. His uneventful life takes a turn when he meets two classmates, Susan Horikita and Kikio Kushida, and suddenly, things start to get a lot more complicated. Kiyotaka enrolls at Tokyo Metropolitan Advanced Nurturing High School, a government-run institution designed to cultivate Japan's elite students. Placed in Class 1D, Kiyotaka quickly learns the school's unique system. Students receive 100,000 points each month, with each point equivalent to 1 yen. However, their homeroom teacher, Sae Chabashira, warns them that points are tied to merit, hinting at hidden consequences. As Kiyotaka starts to settle in, he befriends the cheerful and outgoing Kikio Kushida, while also attempting to connect with the cold and distant Susan Horikita. Hoping to bring Susan out of her shell, Kiyotaka orchestrates a meeting at a cafe where girls typically hang out, secretly inviting Kikio and 4 other classmates to join. However, Susan quickly sees through the setup and leaves in frustration. Throughout April, the carefree Class 1D students spend their points lavishly and neglect their studies, enjoying the lack of apparent discipline. While others are oblivious, Kiyotaka remains cautious, sensing something isn't right. His suspicions are confirmed on May 1st, when the students are shocked to find they've received no points at all. Sae explains the harsh truth. The allowance is based on academic performance and merit. By ignoring their responsibilities, Class 1D has earned nothing for the month, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Sae Chabashira explains the school system to the first-year students, where they can be promoted based on merit. She warns Class D that failing one more test will result in expulsion. This motivates most students except for troublemakers Ken Sudo, Kanji Ike, and Haruki Yamauchi. Susan Horikita invites Kiyotaka Ayanokoji to lunch to discuss strategies for improving Class D's performance. She tries to bring the 3 troublemakers to study at the library, but they leave quickly. Ken, in particular, plans to become rich by playing basketball. That night, Kiyotaka overhears a tense conversation between Susan and her older brother, Manabu, the student council president. Manabu criticizes Susan for isolating herself and failing to make friends, which led to her being placed in Class D. When he tries to attack her, Kiyotaka steps in and easily dodges his strikes, impressing Manabu. Manabu questions Kiyotaka about his fighting skills and entry exam scores, but Kiyotaka remains vague. Later, Susan apologizes for the earlier events, and Kiyotaka brushes it off. She asks about his fighting abilities and exam scores, but he avoids giving direct answers. Susan notes he remains a mystery and reflects on whether her distant personality led to her placement in Class D. During the midterm exams, Class D performs better than expected, with some students achieving top scores. Class D receives their exam results, and everyone passes except Ken Sudo, who misses passing by just 1 point. It's revealed that Kiyotaka Ayanokoji spent 15,000 points to buy old exam questions from an upperclassman, which is allowed under the rules. Kiyotaka tries to invite Ken to a study group but finds him being harassed by Class C students. Kakeru Ryuen, their leader, taunts Ken and pretends to strike him. Hanami Ichino steps in to stop the bullying, threatening to call security. Ken is still upset and refuses Kiyotaka's invitation to study, choosing instead to go to basketball practice. Kiyotaka later discusses equality with their teacher, Sae Chabashira, who confirms that it doesn't exist. Kiyotaka offers to use his points to save Ken from expulsion, but Sae demands 100,000 points. Susan Horikita steps in, offering 50,000 points, and Kiyotaka matches it. Sae accepts, canceling Ken's expulsion. That night, Kikio Kushida organizes a small celebration in Kiyotaka's room. During the party, she asks if Kiyotaka saved Ken, but Kiyotaka redirects the credit to Susan, making her uncomfortable. Afterward, Kikio accidentally leaves her phone behind, and Kiyotaka follows to return it. He discovers her darker, threatening side when she blackmails him into keeping her secret about her true personality. Kiyotaka agrees, and Kikio returns to her cheerful self, leaving Kiyotaka questioning who she really is. In Class 1B, students do well on a quiz, and some thank Hanami Ichinos for helping them study. She hopes to help her class move up to Class 1A. Later, Kiyotaka reflects on his encounter with Kikio, noticing tension between Kikio and Susan, who still seems distant. Kikio talks to Kiyotaka briefly, and Susan mentions she didn't want to be near her. Hanami arrives and they chat about whether they've received their points yet. Class D's monthly points are frozen because of an incident involving Ken Sudo, who defended himself after being attacked by some students from Class C. If no one comes forward as a witness, Ken will take the blame and Class D will lose their points. Hanami later asks Kiyotaka for help with a love letter she received from her friend, Chihiro Shiranami. She asks Kiyotaka to pretend to be her boyfriend so as not to hurt Chihiro's feelings. After some hesitation, Kiyotaka refuses, but when Chihiro arrives, Hanami confirms Kiyotaka is just a friend. Kiyotaka encourages Hanami to be honest with Chihiro. Later, Hanami apologizes for involving Kiyotaka in the situation. Class D starts searching for a witness to Ken's incident. Hanami helps, surprising Kiyotaka's classmates. She later hints at knowing something about Daichi Ishizaki's past and shares a strange clue with Kiyotaka. He notices that Hanami has a lot of points on her phone but doesn't get a chance to ask about it. It's revealed that Eri Sakura captured the incident involving Ken on her camera. The next day, when Kiyotaka asks Eri for the evidence, she panics, drops her camera, and runs away. Eri asks Kiyotaka and Kikio to accompany her to an electronics store to repair her camera. When the clerk, Yukitsu, asks for her contact info, Eri hesitates, so Kiyotaka offers his instead. Afterward, Kikio leaves to freshen up, leaving Kiyotaka and Eri alone. Eri asks for advice, and Kiyotaka tells her not to make a decision she might regret, making Eri blush. When Kikio returns, they part ways, and Kikio asks to visit Kiyotaka later. At the dorms, Kiyotaka and Kikio discover online photos of Eri, realizing she is an internet model who has recently gained popularity. Eri later calls Kikio offering to help with the case involving Ken Sudo. During the hearing led by Student Council President Manabu, both Class C and Class D present their sides about the fight. Suzune remains quiet at first, but Kiyotaka subtly encourages her to speak. Suzune introduces Eri as a witness, but her testimony doesn't fully clear Ken. Class C's teacher, Sakagami, suggests suspending Ken for 2 weeks and the 3 Class C students for 1 week each, but Class D rejects the proposal. Manabu ends the hearing, announcing that a final decision will be made the next day unless new evidence is presented, warning that expulsions are possible. Later, Kiyotaka talks to Eri about her delayed testimony, assuring her it was still helpful. Manabu approaches them, hinting that Eri may not be truthful. Kiyotaka defends her, and when Manabu tries to strike him, Kiyotaka dodges, leaving Eri and Akane surprised. Manabu asks if Kiyotaka can prove Eri's innocence, and Kiyotaka responds that they'll have to wait for the answer. Eri Sakura is troubled by fan letters with personal photos and prefers to stay distant from others. Meanwhile, Suzune Horikita and Kiyotaka Ayanokoji discover something important in a stairwell. Later, Eri blushes when Kiyotaka thanks her, but their conversation is interrupted by a message from Kikio. 3 boys from Class C accuse Ken of attacking them and claim Kikio called them. Suzune uses security cameras to prove the boys started the fight, and they eventually withdraw their accusations after Suzune pressures them. Eri feels followed and calls Kiyotaka, who tracks her phone and finds her held by a stalker named Yukitsu Kasuda. Kiyotaka warns him, takes a photo, and uses cameras to stop him from escaping. Security arrives, and Kasuda is arrested. Eri thanks Kiyotaka, and they talk about her challenges as an idol. She jokes that Kiyotaka never showed romantic interest, confusing him. Suzune is questioned by Sei Chabashira about the Class C complaint withdrawal and is warned to understand Kiyotaka better to move up to Class A. Kiyotaka talks to Ken, who is happy the complaint was dropped, and hints that Suzune helped. Sei finds Kiyotaka intriguing despite being in Class D. Kiyotaka meets Manabu and Akane, who inform him that the complaint withdrawal was accepted. Manabu offers Kiyotaka a student council position, but Kiyotaka refuses. Suzune watches them, serious. Kakeru Ryuin is angry about the failure to expel Ken and punishes his followers, planning to crush the classes. Finally, Kiyotaka and Suzune walk in the rain, where Suzune questions if Kiyotaka manipulated the situation. Kiyotaka admits he allowed her to blackmail the boys but just wants a peaceful life, warning her not to pry into his life again. Suzune Horikita spends her summer studying in her dorm room. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji invites her to the pool, and after some hesitation, she agrees. The night before, Kiyotaka and the boys, Ken Sudo, Kanji Ike, Haruki Yamauchi, and Hideo Sotomura, plan to secretly watch the girls in the changing room. At the pool, Suzune overhears a conversation where Kikio Kushida mentions Kiyotaka's growing popularity. Meanwhile, Hideo communicates with the boys from a distance, while Haruki attempts to sneak into the women's changing room to install cameras. After he struggles, Kanji takes over, just as Class C's Kakeru Ryuen arrives. To buy time for Kanji, Ken confronts Kakeru, causing a fight with Class A students. Manabu arrives, reminding everyone to follow the rules. Kiyotaka asks Suzune to distract everyone with a speech on the diving platform, giving Kanji time to escape unnoticed. Later, Suzune enters the changing room to remove the SD cards from the cameras, stopping the operation. Kiyotaka admits he used her to prevent his classmates from going behind his back. When Kiyotaka asks if she had fun, Suzune says no, so he pushes her into the pool, and she splashes him back, leading others to join in. That night, Kiyotaka sends Suzune an email with a photo of her and the other students. Suzune smiles, commenting that she can get along without others, appreciating the thoughtful gesture. The first-year students go on a luxurious cruise for a class trip. During a play, Kiyotaka Ayanokoji learns from Chabashira that someone has asked for his expulsion. She offers to help him stay in school if he works towards reaching Class A, but he refuses. She warns him that if he doesn't comply, he'll be expelled and lose his freedom. Ayanokoji angrily grabs her by the collar, but she remains calm and mentions her own regrets. He lets her go and contemplates whether to reveal his abilities at the school. The next day, Ayanokoji hangs out with Ken Sudo and his friends. Sudo threatens Yahiko Tatsuka, a Class A student, after Tatsuka insults them. Kohei Katsuragi, the Class A representative, stops the fight and scolds both sides. Ayanokoji later talks with Suzune about the trip's destination, revealing that the school is taking them to a boarding house on an island, possibly with an ulterior motive. Suzune is then approached by Ryuen, who tries to manipulate her over the security camera setup. The bookie, a Class C student, confronts Ryuen, but Albert intervenes violently. Suzune thinks Class C is falling apart. Meanwhile, Sakayanaji is seen plotting behind the scenes, investigating some students. On the ship, Rokusuke Koenji acts arrogantly, and Ichinos and her teacher, Chie Hashinomiya, discuss students to watch out for. Hashinomiya suggests keeping an eye on Ayanokoji, and Ichinos wonders about him but laughs it off. Later, Sakura practices asking Ayanokoji out but gets nervous. When she sees him, she instead asks for his help in socializing. Ayanokoji agrees, and Sakura happily grabs his hand. Kushida sees them together, and Sakura gets embarrassed and leaves. Ayanokoji and Kushida then talk, and he recalls her violent side. Kushida switches between her cheerful and darker personalities, admitting she feels lonely when left alone. The next day, the teachers reveal that the true purpose of the trip is for the students to complete a survival test on a deserted island for a week. Class 1D plans how to use their resources wisely during the island test. They discuss spending S points to earn class points and review the rules for gaining or losing points. Suzune finds the test more complicated than expected. The group heads into the forest to find landmarks, with the 3 idiots of D class splitting off to help. They focus on setting up camp, and 9 volunteers are chosen to search for a good location. Rokusuke Koenji quickly leaves the group, and Kiyotaka and Eri find a cave that's a landmark offering bonus S points. They hide until Kohei and Yahiko leave, then report back to Suzune. Meanwhile, Ken, Kanji, and Haruki find a river and decide to set up camp there. They plan for Suzune to be the leader when claiming the site. Kanji assures everyone the river is safe. Later, Kiyotaka, Haruki, and Eri find Mio Ibuki, who is injured, and invite her to camp. They all discuss how to use their S points. That night, they enjoy fruits and talk about Mio, a Class C student. Kikio brings Mio some fruit, showing kindness despite being from a rival class. Ken then complains about Rokusuke's selfishness, and Terahiko explains that Rokusuke went back to the boat, costing the class 30 S points. Later, Rokusuke is seen admiring the moon on the ship. Ayanokoji and Suzune go on a reconnaissance mission to observe the other classes' camps. They first visit Class B's camp, which is located near a waterfall. The setup is similar to Class D's, but the location is more ideal. They then check out Class A's camp, which is situated in a cave heavily guarded by security. Suzune attempts to get a closer look, but Kohei notices and summons his security team, warning Suzune that her actions could spark a conflict. Next, they visit Class C's camp, located on a beach. Under Ryuen's leadership, the class has spent all their points, treating the test like a vacation, as they know there will be no penalties for doing so. Ryuen also punishes Mio for being disobedient and critical of his leadership. On the third night, someone sneaks into the girls' tent at Class D's camp and searches Mio's bag for her phone. The next day, on the fourth day of the test, Class D conducts more reconnaissance to figure out who the class leaders are. Ayanokoji and Sakura meet Ichinos at Class C's camp, only to learn that everyone except Mio Ibuki had withdrawn from the test. On the fifth day, Kei Karuizawa discovers that her underwear has been stolen. Class D conducts a bag search, and Yamauchi finds the underwear in Ike's bag. Ayanokoji takes it, and a pat-down search is done, with Yosuke checking him. Yosuke reports that Ayanokoji doesn't have it, and, to protect his reputation, he decides to take the blame and keep the underwear, knowing it would be least damaging to his image since Kei is his girlfriend. After the underwear theft incident, trust within D-Class starts to break down. The girls decide to separate the boys and girls into different camps. They ask Yosuke Hirata to watch over the boys and help them move their tent. Suzun, noticing that Hirata is also a boy, points out that he needs someone to watch over him as well. The girls discuss who could do it and decide on Kiyotaka because he doesn't seem to be as troublesome as the other boys. While Kiyotaka and Hirata work on setting up a new tent, Kiyotaka complains about being picked last. Hirata tries to cheer him up before leaving to help one of the girls, leaving Kiyotaka alone. After finishing the tent, Mio Ibuki approaches Kiyotaka and asks if he has any thoughts about who stole the underwear. She mentions that Ken Sudo suspects her. Kiyotaka surprises Mio by saying he trusts her, making her blush and thank him. That night, Kiyotaka and Suzun sit by the campfire. Kiyotaka notices that Suzun has been sick throughout the test, even though she was resting during the cruise. Despite her illness, Suzun insists on pushing through. The next day, the class gathers food before an incoming rainstorm. While fishing in the river, Kiyotaka asks Suzun to show him her leader card to check if Kohei Katsuragi's card was real. After seeing it, Kiyotaka is still unsure. Meanwhile, Kikio tells Mio and Haruki that she thinks the two of them seem close. Soon after, Yamauchi approaches Suzun and puts mud in her hair to provoke Kiyotaka, but Suzun retaliates by throwing him to the ground. While Suzun goes to wash off the mud, someone steals her leader card. She secretly tells Kiyotaka about it. Later, someone sets fire to the camp, burning the survival test manual and causing more distrust within D-Class. In the chaos, Mio sneaks away from the camp. The class begins to suspect that Mio is behind the thefts, especially since she's an outsider. Suzun and others search for her, and Suzun eventually discovers that Mio stole her leader card. Mio attacks Suzun, knowing she can get away with it as long as no one sees. Weakened by illness, Suzun is easily overpowered by Mio, who then takes the card to a student who requested it. Mio Ibuki tells Kohei over a ham radio that she has Suzun's leader card, revealing that Class A and Class C are secretly working together. Kiyotaka finds Suzun, who is sick, and helps her to a cave. He suggests she withdraw from the test, but Suzun refuses and later faints. Kiyotaka carries her to the teacher's camp, where she decides to withdraw. On the last day, the students clean up and guess the other class leaders. Class B doesn't guess, and Kiyotaka gives Yosuke a list of leaders. Kakeru reveals he made a deal with Kohei to transfer points to Class A. Class C spends their remaining points, and everyone except Kakeru, Mio, and Satoru withdraws. Class C guesses the wrong leaders. The results show Class D wins with 225 points, followed by Class B, A, and C. Arisu explains that their plan worked by making everyone distrust Kohei. Suzun is surprised by the results and doesn't understand what happened. Kiyotaka reveals he manipulated the situation, making Mio steal the leader card and leading the other classes to guess wrong. He explains that he didn't interfere with Class B's leader search to keep their alliance safe. Suzun is impressed by his strategy and asks why he does this if he doesn't want to move up. Kiyotaka manipulates the situation to make Suzun appear as the reason for Class D's victory. Kikio talks to Kiyotaka, asking if he trusts her or Suzun. Kiyotaka doesn't answer, frustrating Kikio. Later, Kakeru reveals the Class A Class C alliance's goal is to get students to sign a contract paying 20,000 points a month. Kohei faces criticism for his actions, and it's revealed that Arisu sabotaged him. Kiyotaka meets his teacher, Sae, who praises him and reveals that his father wanted him expelled. Suzun thanks Kiyotaka for his help but warns him not to get too friendly as she still wants to reach Class A. Kiyotaka reflects that he uses everyone as pawns to achieve his goal of winning, bringing the anime to an end.